Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I'm your host, and today I'm genuinely excited because we are taking a massive step back.
Yeah.
Usually we're zoomed in on the gears of the modern world.
Yeah.
AI, supply chains, energy grids, all the stuff that keeps the lights on. But today we are looking at the operating system of humanity itself.
It really is. It's the single biggest demographic grouping on the planet, if you don't count, biology itself. It shapes how we vote, how we eat, who we marry, and how we face death.
We were talking about religion. But before you hit pause or roll your eyes thinking this is going to be a sermon or a debate about which book is the right one, stop.
Please, yeah.
Because that is exactly what we are not doing. We aren't here to debate theology. We aren't asking, does God exist?
No, not at all. We're looking at the phenomenon, the container. We're asking, what is this thing we call religion? Where did the word even come from? Why does our brain seem, I don't know, wired for it?
And maybe the most shocking part is the concept itself, a modern invention.
That's the real kicker.
That's the hook that honestly floored me when I was going through the stack of research you brought today. The idea that religion, this thing we just assume is as old as the first cave painting, is actually a relatively new piece of, mental technology.
It sounds completely counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It sounds wrong. I mean, we talk about ancient religions all the time, but you're telling me that if I hopped in a time machine, went back to ancient Greece or pre-colonial India, and asked someone about their religion, they wouldn't just be confused by the language.
No, they'd be confused by the whole category.
By the category itself.
Precisely. It would be like asking a fish to describe the water. It's not a separate thing. It's just the medium they swim in. The whole way we separate sacred things from secular things is a very specific, very modern, and frankly, a largely Western way of organizing the world.
So our mission today is to deconstruct that box. We're going to look at the etymological feud over the word itself, which is surprisingly spicy for a debate over Latin roots.
It is, yeah.
We're going to look at how colonial history basically forced the world into these neat little boxes. And then we're going to pivot to the hard science, the psychology, the sociology, the cognitive reasons why 84% of the human population identifies with a religious group.
And we'll finish by looking at the future, because contrary to that popular narrative that, science is killing God, the data tells a very, very different story.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start right at the beginning. The word itself, religion. It's English, obviously, but it comes from the Latin religio.
It does, but here's the thing. Even in ancient Rome, right at the source, there was no real consensus on what religio actually meant. In fact, you've got this heavyweight philosophical boxing match that spans centuries.
Okay, so in one corner we have Cicero,
the great Roman statesman, orator, philosopher writing in the 1st century BC. And Cicero argued that religio derives from the verb religere.
Religere, and what does that translate to?
It means to go over again or to read again, to consider carefully.
That sounds very studious, not very spiritual.
It is. For Cicero, being religious wasn't about having mystical visions or, feeling a warm, fuzzy glow in your heart. It was about diligence. It was about conscientiousness. The opposite of religio for Cicero was negligentia negligence.
Wait a minute. That's a fascinating connection.
Yeah.
So religion as the opposite of negligence. In the Ciceronian sense, an accountant who triple checks his spreadsheet to make sure every penny is accounted for is being religious.
In that very specific sense, yes, absolutely. It implies a scrupulous attention to duty. A religious person is someone who follows the protocols, who pays attention to the details of the rituals or the laws, not because they're faithful in our modern emotional sense, but because they are conscientious.
That's almost bureaucratic.
It's very bureaucratic. It feels very Roman: order, structure, duty. But then fast forward a few centuries, and the Christians enter the ring.
Right.
And you have thinkers like Lactantius and later St. Augustine, and they really didn't like Cicero's definition.
Too dry for them.
Far too dry, too procedural. They argued for a completely different root, religare.
Religare? That sounds like ligament, something that connects.
Exactly. It means to bind, to fasten, to connect. The idea here is that religion is the thing that binds you to God. It's a tether.
Or it binds a community together.
That too. And that's the definition that really stuck in the West, isn't it? When we talk about religion today, we think of that binding. I am bound to this creed, or I am bound to this community.
Yeah, that's definitely the one that won out.
It is certainly the dominant view in Western Christianity. But, and here's the crucial context we so often miss, this is where the whole invention part comes in. Whether you like Cicero's diligence or Augustine's binding in the ancient world, neither of them saw religio as a separate sphere of life.
What do you mean by a separate sphere?
Well, think about your life today. You probably have your secular life, your job, your politics, your gym routine, and then maybe on the weekend you have your spiritual life. You go to a service or you meditate, you pray. They're in different compartments.
Right, church and state. Sunday morning versus Monday morning.
Exactly. That dichotomy, that separation, it just didn't exist. In ancient Rome, religio was woven into the absolute fabric of the state. Senate meetings were religious events. Declaring war was a religious ritual. You couldn't pull them apart.
I saw a note in the research about Julius Caesar. He used the word religio to talk about the oath that soldiers took.
Yes, the military oath. Following orders was a religious act. It was a solemn duty to the state and the gods of the state, all at the same time. You couldn't separate your political loyalty from your religious loyalty. They were one and the same thing.
To be a Roman was to practice Roman religion.
I got it. It's so hard for us to wrap our heads around that because we're so used to religion being a private belief.
Yeah.
But my favorite example of how broad this concept used to be, you have to bring this one up.
I have to because I love it. Pliny the Elder and the elephants.
The elephants. It's such a beautiful, weird detail from his natural history.
So Pliny, the Roman naturalist, he actually writes that elephants have a sense of religio.
He did. He really did.
He observed them looking up at the night sky, at the moon and stars, and he didn't just see animals gazing into space. He interpreted that as awe, as reverence.
And this is the key. He wasn't saying the elephants had a Bible or a priest or a theology.
No.
He was saying they possessed that Ciceronian quality of careful consideration of the cosmos. They recognized the grandeur of the universe, and they respected it.
Which implies that religio was almost a biological trait or maybe a cognitive state rather than a membership in a club?
Exactly. It was a stance toward reality, not a checkbox on a census form.
So if that's where we started, with this really broad, integrated sense of duty and awe and social cohesion, how on earth did we end up with the world religions model we have today? The pie chart in the textbook, 30% Christian, 20% Muslim, whatever. When did we start putting people in these rigid boxes?
That is the invention part of our title, and it really kicks into high gear in the 16th and 17th centuries. You have two massive world-altering things happening at once. First, you have the Protestant Reformation in Europe.
Which just rips the map apart.
Completely. I mean, before that, in the West, you just had Christendom. It was the water everyone swam in. Right. But suddenly, you have Lutherans, Calvinists, Anabaptists, Catholics, Anglicans, and they aren't just disagreeing, they are killing each other.
The 30 Years' War, civil wars, it's just chaos.
Total chaos. And so the state needs a way to manage this violence.
Right, they have to do something.
They need to define what belongs to the church, which becomes the realm of private belief, and what belongs to the state, the realm of public order, so they can stop these wars of religion. They literally invent the concept of religion as a private, distinct category to quarantine the explosive stuff so society can function.
Okay, you can believe whatever you want in your private religion box. Just don't let it mess with the state box.
That's it. It's a political solution. But at the exact same time, Europe is expanding. The age of exploration is underway. So sailors, merchants, and missionaries are getting on boats and landing in the Americas, in India, in Japan, and they are carrying this new, very specific mental box called religion with them.
And they're looking for the local equivalent. Take me to your leader and also take me to your church.
Right. And this leads to some profound misunderstandings. They land in the New World and ask the Native Americans, "What is your religion?" And the answer is usually just silence or confusion.
Because, again, no word for it.
Because they didn't have the concept. Their spirituality was just life.
Yeah.
It was how you hunted buffalo. It was the medicine you used for a fever. It was how you treated your elders. It wasn't a thing you did once a week.
It was the air they breathed.
It was. So the Europeans looked at this and said, oh, these people have no religion. Or even worse, they have devil worship and superstition.
It's a failure of translation that leads to cultural erasure. But it gets even more concrete when we look at Japan. This story about the treaty in 1853, this really drove it home for me.
It is a perfect case study. So Commodore Perry shows up with American warships, gunboat diplomacy.
Right.
He demands Japan open its ports to trade. But he also demands a treaty that includes a clause for freedom of religion for Americans living in Japan.
Which is just standard American boilerplate. We need our rights protected.
To the Americans, yes. To the Japanese, it was a linguistic nightmare. They literally did not have a word for religion that matched the Western concept of a specific set of doctrines distinct from the state.
Right.
They had Buddhism, they had Shinto rituals, they had Confucian ethics, but these were all overlapping layers of culture. They weren't distinct teams you could join.
So what do? Did they just shrug their shoulders?
They had to invent a word. Shukyu. It was a neologism, a brand new word, created specifically to satisfy the Western treaty. They had to carve out a conceptual space in their own culture just to interact with the West.
That's the power of language right there.
Yeah.
We forced them to restructure their own reality to fit our legal paperwork.
And we did the exact same thing in India. We use the word Hinduism today as if it's a single thing. You know, like, I am a Catholic, I'm a Hindu. But Himli was originally just a geographic term.
Right. It had to do with the Indus River, didn't it?
Yes. The Persians used it to describe the people who lived beyond the Indus River. It was like saying Southerners or Europeans. It just meant the folks over there.
So it wasn't a belief system. It was a location.
Exactly. But when the British colonizers arrived in the 19th century, they needed to categorize the population for the census and for legal codes. They saw this wild diversity of practices. I mean, people worshiping Vishnu, people worshiping Shiva, village deities, philosophical atheists, tantric rituals, and they just lumped it all together under one umbrella, Hinduism.
So Hinduism, as a unified world religion, is basically a British administrative convenience.
In terms of the label and the singular category, yes. Now, obviously, the traditions, the texts, the Vedas, the rituals, they are ancient. But the idea that they all belong to one single system is a colonial imposition. It's the West projecting its own expectation of one God, one book, one church onto a culture that operates totally differently.
It really makes you question the entire world religions textbook. We're essentially looking at a map that was drawn by people who didn't understand the territory.
That's the key takeaway. The map is not the territory. But, and here is the paradox, even if the map is flawed, the territory is still populated. We might have invented the word, but we didn't invent the behavior.
Right. We can argue semantics all day, but the numbers are just staggering. 84% of the world, that's the number from the Pew Research Center. That's what, 5.8 billion people identify with a religious group. So even if the definitions are fuzzy, the identification is very real.
It is massive. And despite all the nuances we just discussed, demographers and sociologists still need those boxes to make sense of the data. So we generally stick to the big four to describe the global landscape.
Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism.
Correct. Those four comprise about 77% of the global population. But if we really want to understand how these people think, not just count them, we need a better taxonomy than just a list of names. So scholars usually break them down into three major families of belief, and these families operate on very different logics.
I found this breakdown really helpful. It moves away from just names and looks at the underlying operating system of the belief. The first family is the Abrahamic.
The Western monotheism, so Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and then smaller groups like the Baha'i and the Druze.
And the core logic here is history, lineage.
It's revelation and covenant. The idea is that God is a singular personal entity who acts in history.
Oh, yeah?
He speaks to prophets, he gives laws. There is a start point, creation, and an end point, judgment. It's a linear view of time, and it's very, very text-based. It is written.
Okay, so that's the linear text-heavy one-God model. Then you move east and you hit the Dharmic family.
The Indian tradition, so Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, the logic here isn't necessarily about a creator, God giving orders, though that can be part of it, but the core logic is dharma.
Which translates to law or duty, right?
Yes, but more in the sense of cosmic law, like gravity. The universe has an order. If you act against it, you accumulate bad karma. If you act with it, you move toward liberation. The goal isn't always heaven in the Western sense. It's escape from the cycle of rebirth.
It sounds more mechanical in a spiritual way, like cause and effect. You drop the ball, it falls. You do a bad thing, you get bad results in the next life.
Precisely. It's an engine of cause and effect.
Yeah.
And then the third family is the Taoic or East Asian traditions, Taoism, Confucianism, Shinto.
And the key word here is Tao.
The way.
The flow. This is much less about dogma and much more about harmony. Harmony with nature, harmony with the ancestors, harmony with the state. In Shinto, for example, there are no 10 commandments. There's no thou shalt not.
Really?
No, it's all about purity and pollution. It's about maintaining a right relationship with the spirits of the land. This helps explain why people in East Asia often don't tick the religion box on surveys, even if they're doing rituals every day.
Exactly. If you ask a Japanese person, are you religious? They might say no, because they associate religion with that intense, dogmatic, Abrahamic style. Do you believe in the creed?
Right.
But if you ask them, do you visit the shrine on New Year's? Do you have an altar for your ancestors? They'll say, of course. To them, that's just culture. That's just propriety. It's like brushing your teeth.
Which brings us to a huge and often invisible group, the folk religions.
Yeah.
The data says there are 400 million people in this category, but you mentioned they're often overlooked in these big conversations.
They are the silent giants. A folk religion is the practical spirituality of the village. It's syncretic. It mixes everything. So in China, you might have a mix of Buddhist compassion, Taoist longevity practices, and Confucian ethics, all blended with worship of a local river god.
It's like a spiritual toolbox. You just grab whatever works for the problem at hand.
It is highly pragmatic. You don't worship to save your soul in some distant theological sense. You worship to ensure the harvest is good, or that your child passes their exam, or that grandma recovers from the flu. It's very transactional and local. But because it doesn't have a pope or a Bible, Western demographers often just label it other or miss it entirely.
And speaking of missing things, we have to talk about the knowns, the growing slice of the pie chart, at least in the West. Atheists, agnostics.
And the spiritual, but not religious. That distinction is vital. A huge portion of the knowns in the U.S., for example, actually believe in a higher power.
They just don't trust institutions.
Exactly. They've left the church, but they haven't necessarily left God. They have unbundled.
So we have the definitions, or the lack thereof. We have the categories. We want to get to the machinery, the hardware.
Right.
Why do we do this? Why is the human animal so prone to looking for invisible agents and forming these groups?
This is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
No.
If religion is an invention, why did everyone invent it? And you have three main lenses here: sociology, psychology, and now cognitive science.
Let's start with the sociologists. Emil Durkheim, the big gun.
The father of the field, really. Writing in the early 1900s, Durkheim looked at religion and said, this isn't about God, this is about us.
Us? You mean the group, the community?
Yes. He argued that religion is the way society worships itself. Think about a totem pole in a tribe. The totem represents the clan. When they dance around it, what they're really doing is celebrating their own unity.
He called it collective effervescence, right? That's the term.
That's the term, that buzzing, electric feeling you get when you are in a massive crowd all focused on the same thing.
Like a Taylor Swift concert or the Super Bowl.
Exactly. Durkheim would say those are religious experiences. They function in exactly the same way. They bind the individual to the group. They create shared norms and values. Without that social glue, society falls apart into what he called enemy normlessness, alienation.
So for Durkheim, religion is a social survival mechanism. It keeps us from killing each other by giving us a shared sacred object to rally around. But William James, the psychologist, he went the other way.
The total opposite. James wasn't interested in the crowd at all. He was interested in the solitude. He defined religion as the feelings, acts, and experiences of individual men in their solitude.
So far as they apprehend themselves to stand in relation to whatever they may consider the divine.
Right. It's the mystic on the mountaintop. It's the internal click, the aha moment.
A near-death experience.
The feeling of oneness. James wanted to know what was happening in the mind, not the church. He felt the institution was just the secondary crust. The raw experience was the molten core.
And that leads us perfectly to the modern cognitive scientists.
Yeah.
Because now we can actually look at the mind, or at least the evolutionary architecture of the brain. And their theory is, well, it's a bit startling.
It's the theory of HADD, the Hyperactive Agency Detection Device.
HADD. Okay, break that down for me.
Okay, so our brains are evolved for survival, not for truth. We are pattern-seeking machines. Imagine you are an early human on the African savanna. You are walking through the tall grass. Suddenly, you hear a rustle, snap.
Okay.
You have two choices. Theory A, it's just the wind. Theory B, it's a lion.
Okay, let's play the odds. If I pick theory A, it's just the wind, and I'm wrong.
Your lunch. You die. You don't pass on your genes. Game over.
Right. But if I pick theory B, it's a lion, and I'm wrong.
You just get a little spooked, you run away, you waste a few calories. The cost of a false positive is very low, but the cost of a false negative is death.
So evolution basically bred us to be paranoid.
It bred us to detect agency, to assume that when something happens, someone or something did it. The grass didn't just move, a lion moved it. The thunder didn't just boom, a powerful being banged a drum.
And that just scales up. The plague didn't just happen, God sent it. The crop failed, a witch cursed it.
Exactly. We are hardwired to look for the who behind the what. Religion, in this view, is a byproduct of that survival mechanism. We populate the universe with invisible agents, gods, spirits, ancestors, because our brains are allergic to randomness. We need a narrative.
That explains the origin, maybe, but why does it persist? Is it just a glitch? Because the data you mentioned suggests it's actually good for us.
This is the utility argument. The Mayo Clinic and others have published extensive data on this. Religious involvement correlates with lower blood pressure, lower rates of depression, better immune function, and longer life expectancy.
Is it the power of prayer, or is that just, I don't know, hanging out with people?
It's likely a mix, but the community aspect is huge. It goes right back to Durkheim. Social isolation is as deadly as smoking. Religion provides a built-in support network. If you get sick, the congregation brings you a casserole. That literally lowers your stress hormones.
Plus the coping mechanism. I mean, if I believe my suffering has a purpose, it's God's plan, or it's balancing my karma, I can endure it better than if I think it's just random cruel luck.
Meaning is a powerful drug. Viktor Frankl wrote about this in the concentration camps. Those who could find meaning survived longer, and religion is a meaning-making machine.
But we have to look at the outliers. Because if religion is so good for health and social cohesion, why are the richest, healthiest countries in the world, places like Sweden, Norway, Japan, abandoning it?
This is the famous secularization hypothesis.
Yeah.
The theory was that as societies get rich, safe, and scientific, they don't need religion anymore. They have insurance companies for security, they have hospitals for health, they have Netflix for entertainment.
God fills the gaps, and when the gaps get smaller, God gets smaller.
That's the theory. And in Europe, for the most part, it holds up perfectly. The wealthier the country, the less religious it is.
But then there is the United States.
The giant, baffling exception. The U.S. is wealthy, scientifically advanced, high-tech, and yet, compared to Europe, it is incredibly religious.
Why? Why is America different?
There's a fascinating theory called religious market theory. It basically treats religion like a business. In Europe, for centuries, you had state churches, the Church of England, the Lutheran Church of Sweden. They were monopolies.
Right.
And like any monopoly, like the DMV, they got lazy.
They didn't have to compete for customers.
Exactly. They had guaranteed customers through taxes. So the service got boring, the message got stale, and when people finally had the choice, they just stopped going. But in the U.S., because of the separation of church and state, you had a free market, no state funding. If a church wanted to survive, it had to hustle.
It had to market itself.
It had to provide better music, better childcare, better sermons, better coffee after the service.
It's spiritual capitalism.
It is, and competition drives up consumption. Because American churches are constantly adapting to the market, American religiosity stays high, they innovate, they create megachurches, cowboy churches, biker churches, you name it.
That is such a cynical and yet completely compelling explanation. But looking forward, zooming out to the whole globe, where is this all going? I feel like the narrative in my social circles is religion is dying, science has won.
And that narrative is statistically dead wrong. If you look at the global demographic trends, the world is actually becoming more religious, not less.
How is that possible if the West is secularizing?
Because the West is shrinking, or at least it's stagnating. It all comes down to birth rates.
Oh.
The knowns, secular people, have very low birth rates. They tend to live in cities, focus on careers, and have fewer children, on average well below replacement level.
Whereas religious populations
have much higher birth rates. Sub-Saharan Africa is exploding in population, and it is intensely religious, both Christian and Muslim. The future of Christianity isn't in Paris or Pittsburgh, it's in Lagos and Manila.
So biology just wins.
Demography is destiny. By 2075, Islam is projected to potentially become the largest religion in the world, simply due to population momentum. The secular West might feel like it's the future, but statistically, it's becoming a smaller and smaller island in a very religious sea.
That reframes everything. We aren't moving toward some kind of Star Trek atheist future. We are moving toward a potentially more polarized, but definitely more deeply faithful world.
A world where understanding these boxes, Abrahamic, Dharmic folk, is going to be more important geopolitically than ever before. We can't just wish religion away or assume it will evaporate with better education. It seems to be fundamental to how the majority of the species sees reality.
We've covered so much ground today. We've gone from the Roman Senate to the African savanna to the future of the global South. And we've realized that the very word religion itself is a clumsy tool.
It's a map that doesn't quite fit the territory, but it's still the only map we have.
I want to leave the listener with a thought that struck me while we were discussing the knowns and the elephants. If Pliny was right, if elephants can have religio, and if Durkheim was right, that we are really just worshiping society, then maybe the secular world isn't actually non-religious at all. Maybe we've just changed the gods.
We trade the altar for the stadium or the political rally or the brand.
Exactly.
What?
We still bind ourselves. We still have religio. We just don't call it that anymore.
We are, and it seems we always have been, believing animals.
A provocative thought to end on. Next time you catch yourself checking your phone religiously or defending your favorite sports team with irrational fury, ask yourself, is this my religio? Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
See you next time. Okay, so the story we're getting into today is one of those that it kind of challenges everything you think you know about things like defeat and duty.
It really does. It pushes the boundaries.
We're looking at this case of just extreme survival. I mean, extreme. It's about a Japanese officer who, with his remaining soldiers, kept fighting, hiding, running a resistance against the U.S. Marines.
For 512 days.
Right. 512 days after World War II had officially ended.
Yeah, just let that sink in. The war's over. Peace treaties are signed, but not for them.
It's almost 17 months in total isolation on a Pacific island. It's hard to even picture.
And it's not just some random historical footnote, This is a story about incredible resilience, leadership. It's led by Captain Sakae Ōba of the Imperial Japanese Army.
Sakae Ōba.
Yeah. And he got so good at evading capture, so frustratingly effective on Saipan, that the U.S. Marines actually gave him this nickname.
I know this bit. The Fox, right.
Exactly, the Fox. Kind of grudging respect in there, you feel. So our mission today really is to dig into this guy's life, look at the records, the stories.
And figure out the core of it.
Yeah. How does a man go from being a school teacher, because that's where he started, to becoming this legendary guerrilla leader, keeping soldiers and hundreds of civilians alive in the jungle for that long?
Okay, let's start there then, because that background, it's striking, isn't it? Before the Fox, before the captain even, he's just ship of the teacher.
Born in Gamagori, Aichi Prefecture, 1914. He goes to the teacher training school there, graduates in 33.
And gets a job.
Yeah, gets a faculty position at a public school. He even gets married around this time to his wife, Minako Hirano. Seems like a pretty standard, settled life path.
Totally the opposite of what you'd expect from a future jungle fighter holding out for months on end.
Well, that's what's so interesting, this duality. Because in 1934, he joins the 18th Infantry Regiment.
So a pretty sharp turn from the classroom.
A very sharp turn from the, structured discipline of teaching kids to the rigid hierarchy of the Imperial Japanese Army. And he moves fast. He's deployed to Manchukuo.
Which was a real hotspot then.
Absolutely. Then he's involved right at the start of the Second Sino-Japanese War. He's part of the amphibious invasion of Shanghai, August 1937.
So the teacher's definitely gone by this point. He's a seasoned soldier.
He is. And rising through the ranks. Makes captain by March 1943. He's seen serious combat by then.
That early service gives us the military man. But the really crucial moment, the thing that sets up this whole Saipan story, happens in early 1944, right?
That's the one. The 18th Regiment gets orders. They're moving from Manchuria to the Pacific Theater.
And Shupa gets a specific assignment within the regiment.
Yes, and this is key. Despite being a captain, he's put in charge of the regiment's company of combat medics. Not a frontline infantry command, but the medics.
Seems slightly unusual for a captain with his experience.
Maybe, but it turns out to be, well, grimly fortunate because of what happens next. They board their transport ship, the Sakae Ōba, heading for the Pacific.
On disaster strikes.
Big time. Yeah. February 29th, 1944, Leap Day. An American submarine, the USS Trout, finds them, fires torpedoes.
It's the Sakae Ōba.
Yeah, sinks it. Over half the regiment goes down with the ship.
Yeah.
It's a catastrophe.
But Shiba survives.
He does, along with maybe 600 or so other troops from the regiment.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. While some survivors get picked up by other ships and taken elsewhere, Shiba and the 600, they get scattered, stranded.
On Saipan.
On Saipan. So he finds himself marooned. His unit is basically shattered.
Yeah.
But reports say he immediately starts organizing the survivors he can find. Tankers, engineers, his medics, obviously, trying to create some kind of cohesive group.
Setting up an aid station, trying to bring order to chaos.
Exactly. But the real chaos, that arrives on June 15th, 1944. That's when the Battle of Saipan begins, the American invasion.
And Saipan. That was a brutal fight, but relatively quick, wasn't it? For the Americans, anyway.
Brutal is the word, and swift, yes. By early July, it's clear the Japanese position is hopeless. The end is coming.
Which leads to the final, desperate act.
The Banzai Charge, arguably the most intense and certainly the largest of the entire Pacific War.
July 7th, Sheb's there.
He is. He and what's left of his men, they participate in this 15-hour frenzy of fighting. Suicide charge, essentially.
The scale is hard to comprehend.
It really is. When the smoke clears, 4,300 Japanese soldiers are dead, just from that one charge.
And the island is declared secure by the Allies just 2 days later?
Yep, July 9th. Game over.
Yep.
The carnage was so complete, the Japanese command back home. They have no idea who might have possibly survived that final charge.
So administratively?
They closed the book on him. By September 30th, 1944, the Imperial Japanese Army officially presumes Captain Sakae Ōba is dead, killed in action on Saipan.
And they give him that posthumous promotion.
That's right. Promoted to major.
Posthumously.
As far as the entire Japanese government and military structure was concerned, his story ended there, in the summer of 44.
But, and this is the whole point of our deep dive, he wasn't dead.
Not even slightly. He somehow survives the Banzai charge, slips away into the interior of the island, and this is where his leadership really kicks in a totally new way.
He starts gathering survivors?
Yeah, gradually.
Yeah.
Finds other soldiers who evaded capture or survived the final battles. Eventually commands over 100 of them. But here's the really remarkable part, the thing that elevates this beyond just a standard holdout story.
The civilians?
Exactly. He doesn't just look after soldiers. He finds, organizes, and takes responsibility for over 200 Japanese civilians who are also hiding in the jungle. Families, children, elderly.
Wow. Okay, that changes the dynamic completely. This isn't just guerrilla warfare now.
No, it's like he's running a hidden society. Think about it. Food, water, sanitation, discipline, keeping morale up for soldiers and terrified civilians, all while being hunted.
Where do they even hide? Saipan isn't that huge an island.
It's not, but it's rugged. Mountainous jungle in the interior. He places the civilians in hidden mountain caves, sets up these carefully concealed jungle villages. Real organizational skill there.
And his base of operations?
Mount Tapacha. It's the highest point on Saipan. Not massively high, maybe 473 meters, something like that.
But high enough to see everything?
Pretty much. It gave him a 360-degree view of the island, perfect for spotting American movements, planning raids.
Raids? So they were actively fighting?
They were conducting guerrilla-style raids, yes. Mostly hit-and-run stuff, targeting American positions primarily to get supplies, food, medicine, maybe weapons. Quick strikes, then melt back into the jungle.
Which must have driven the Americans absolutely crazy. They've secured the island, the battle's won, but there's this ghost group still nipping at their heels.
Precisely. They control Saipan, but they can't stamp out this last pocket of resistance. And Shiba is so good at it, the speed, the stealth, the way he just vanishes. That's why they start calling him the Fox.
You can almost hear the frustration in that nickname.
Oh, definitely. He becomes this major thorn in the side of the occupying force, a psychological irritant as much as a physical one.
I still struggle with the logistics, though. How do you keep 300-plus people hidden, silent, fed for months on end, especially with civilians, kids? That's incredibly difficult.
It's the core question, isn't it? It points to incredible discipline, which maybe loops back to that teacher background. Structure, rules, consequences. He enforced near total silence during the day, camouflage discipline. It had to be meticulous.
Why must have been close calls.
Oh, absolutely. And the sources mentioned this one amazing story, probably the climax of the American effort to catch him, late 1944. The Marine commander is just furious, fed us.
So he orders something drastic.
Yeah, this massive island-wide dragnet. Get this. They line up Marines, shoulder to shoulder, maybe 2 meters apart, right across the width of the island.
Like a human comb, basically.
Exactly. And they start sweeping north from the south end. The idea is to flesh out everything, leave no stone unturned. They will find the fox.
That sounds impossible to evade.
You'd think so, right? But it fails. Utterly.
Ow.
Ōba and his group apparently hid on these incredibly narrow ledges high up on the cliffs of Mount Tapachau. The sources say, sometimes the Marines sweeping below were less than 20 feet beneath them.
20 feet, and they weren't spotted.
Unbelievable, isn't it? Perfect camouflage, absolute silence, nerves of steel. They just waited it out as the Marines passed underneath.
Wow. The commander must have been
Humiliated. Apparently he was relieved of his command shortly after that failed sweep. It wasn't just about force. Ōba beat them with intelligence, patience, and organization.
And what was his goal at this point? Did he think Japan could still win? Or was it just survival?
It seems like a mix. He definitely rejected unnecessary fighting. His priority, according to accounts, was protecting the civilians under his care.
So duty shifted from fighting the enemy to keeping his people alive.
It looks like it. Staying alive, keeping the group intact. That became the mission. Perhaps waiting, hoping the war situation might somehow change, or that they could continue the fight later. Duty endured, even if the context changed.
But the war didn't continue for Japan. It ended August 45.
Right. Emperor Hirohito announces the surrender. The documents are signed in September. But Ōba and his group, they're still up there on Mount Tapachau. Cut off. They don't know, or maybe they don't believe it.
So the holdout continues, past the end of the war. For how long exactly?
512 days in total, from when he first started organizing survivors after the Sakae Maru sinking, through the battle, and deep into the post-war period. But the final surrender, that's months after VJ Day.
How do you even convince someone like that, someone so committed, so isolated, that it's truly over and they need to surrender, especially without dishonor?
That was the challenge. It couldn't just be an American demand. It needed something more. It finally happens in late November 1945.
What was the catalyst?
The Americans brought in a former Japanese Major General, Uma Hachiyamas, someone Ōba would likely respect.
And Amma just ordered him down?
Not exactly. It was more subtle, more resonant. Amma went near their suspected hiding places and actually sang the anthem of the Japanese infantry branch.
Sang it.
As a signal, perhaps. A call they'd recognize. Something deeply tied to their identity as soldiers, but not an aggressive act. A way to draw them out, establish trust.
Did it work?
It did. It got their attention. Amo then presented official surrender documents, not from the Americans, but from the now-defunct Imperial General Headquarters in Tokyo. Proof from their own side that the war was done.
That must have been the key. Official orders, even from a dissolved command. Fulfilling duty one last time.
Exactly. It provided the framework for an honorable surrender. So on December 1st, 1945, nearly 3 full months after Japan formally surrendered, Ōba and his remaining 46 men prepared to come down.
It wasn't just a walk out of the jungle, I imagine.
No, it was formal, dignified. They gathered on Mount Tapachau one last time. They sang a song of departure, honoring the spirits of their comrades who died on Saipan.
A final ceremony.
Yes. Then Captain Ōba marched his men down and surrendered his sword to Lieutenant Colonel Howard G. Kyrgyz of the U.S. Marine Corps. They were the absolute last organized Japanese resistance on Saipan.
An incredible end to that chapter.
Yeah.
What happens next? He goes back to Japan.
He does. Repatriated. And of course, once the Japanese government realizes he's alive, that posthumous promotion to major gets rescinded pretty quickly.
Must have been quite the shock back home. Major Ōba is dead. Actually, Captain Ōba is alive and coming home.
Imagine. And the personal side. He's finally reunited with his wife, Mineko, and he meets his son for the very first time.
His son.
Yeah, the child was born in 1937. Just after Ōba had left for service in China, he'd been away for almost 8 years, missed his entire childhood.
That's heartbreaking, but also a chance to reconnect. How does he adapt? After nearly a decade of war, culminating in 16 months of intense guerrilla life and isolation, adjusting back must have been hard.
You would absolutely expect it to be.
Yeah.
PTSD, difficulty fitting in.
Yeah.
We hear those stories about other holdouts sometimes, but Ōba seems different.
How so?
He integrates back into civilian life with remarkable success. It's almost seamless, which is maybe the most surprising part of his post-war story.
Really? What did he do?
He leverages those skills, the organization, the leadership, the resourcefulness honed in the jungle. He gets hired by the Marue department store company in 1952.
A department store. From jungle commander to retail.
Sounds like a leap, But think about it. Management, logistics, dealing with people. He rises through the company, eventually serves on their board of directors, right up until 1992.
Wow. That's a long and successful corporate career.
And that's not all. He also gets involved in local politics back in his hometown. Serves on the Gamagori City Council from 1967 to 1979.
So Captain Shuba, the Fox, becomes Director Shuba and Councilman Shuba.
Pretty much. The adaptability is just astounding. It suggests those core skills, leadership, organization, resilience, they weren't just military traits. They were fundamental to who he was, applicable anywhere.
That successful career is a legacy in itself. But there are other layers to how he's remembered, right? The relationship with the American Marine.
Ah, yeah. Don Jones. He was a former Marine who had served on Saipan during the war. He became fascinated, maybe even obsessed, with the story of the Fox.
So he sought Ōba out.
He did, years later. Tracked him down in Japan. And Juba actually cooperated with him. Jones wrote a book about Juba's experience, based on interviews. Ōba, The Last Samurai. Saipan, 1944-1945.
The Last Samurai. That's quite a title.
It captured that sense of duty and endurance, I think. But Jones did something else, something really quite moving.
What was that?
He remembered Lieutenant Colonel Kyrgyz, the Marine officer Ōba, surrendered his sword to back in 45. Jones managed to find the now retired Kyrgyz.
No way.
Yes. And he asked him about the sword. Kyrgyz still had it. Jones persuaded him, or Kyrgyz readily agreed, the sources vary slightly, to return it.
Return the surrendered sword.
Yes. Jones acted as the intermediary and presented Yuba's family sword back to him. A gesture of reconciliation, respect, closing a loop between former enemies.
That's powerful. A really profound moment.
It is. And it speaks volumes about the post-war healing process on a personal level. But beyond the sword, beyond the book, there's an even more intimate part of his legacy that came to light much later.
What's that?
His letters. In 2010, long after Ōba had passed away, his second son discovered this huge cache of correspondence, over 1,200 pages of letters and postcards.
Between Ōba and Burrow.
Between Sake and his wife, Mineko, dating all the way back from his initial deployment to China in the late 30s, right up through 1944, just before the communication lines were cut by the war.
Wow. 1,200 pages. That's an incredible historical find.
It really is. And they're not just, I miss you notes. Apparently, they contain really detailed descriptions of daily life during the war from both sides.
So Ōba writing about service in China and Manchuria.
The logistics, the conditions.
Yeah.
And Mineko writing about life on the home front in Gamagori, rationing, anxieties, keeping the family going. It's this incredibly rich, two-sided perspective on the war years.
Have they been published?
They were, as love letters from the fires of war. They offer this deeply human core to the man who became the legend. It grounds the Fox in the reality of Sakae Ōba, the husband and father.
That combination, the military legend, the human story from the letters, it makes sense that it would eventually become a movie.
Right. The 2011 film, Miracle of the Pacific. The Man Called Fox, or Ōba. The Last Samurai in some markets. It tries to capture that whole arc.
So when we look back at Sakae Ōba's life, it's this incredible journey, teacher to captain, captain to the Fox, the elusive guerrilla leader, and then, surprisingly, back to successful civilian life as a businessman and politician.
The constant threads seem to be this unwavering sense of duty, however the mission changed, and this remarkable adaptability, facing impossible situations and just figuring it out. Organizing, leading, surviving.
We've traced his path from that classroom in Aichi to the command post, essentially, on Mount Tapacho, and finally back to the city council chambers in Gamagori. The real insight seems to be about those transferable skills, doesn't it?
I think so. The things that make you a good teacher organization, clarity, managing people, maintaining morale, they're surprisingly similar to what made him a successful, if unconventional, military leader in that specific survival context.
And maybe what made him a good businessman and politician afterwards, too.
Quite possibly. Resource management, long-term planning, discipline. These were crucial in the jungle, and they're crucial in a boardroom or a council meeting.
Which brings us to maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to sort of chew on.
Yeah, consider this. Ōba endured 16 months of intense mental and physical pressure. Constant threat, isolation, responsibility for hundreds of lives, a situation that broke many other Japanese holdouts psychologically when they eventually returned.
Yet he seemed to transition back almost immediately into a productive, successful civilian life. Corporate leader, politician, very different from some others.
So what does his specific experience tell us? What does his successful reintegration suggest about the nature of resilience? Was it that deeply ingrained sense of structure, that organizational focus he maintained even in the jungle, that protected his mind?
Did having those civilians to care for, that clear non-military purpose alongside the military one, keep him grounded in a different way? Was it his pre-war civilian life as a teacher that gave him a foundation to return to?
It's fascinating to compare him to other holdouts, who perhaps lacked that same complex organizational role or strong civilian background. Did Oba's particular brand of duty, focused on structured survival and protection, ultimately shield him from the worst psychological tolls?
And maybe think about the power of those letters, too. That connection maintained through writing, even when physically severed, how much did that anchor him? Okay, lots to unpack there for yourself. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I'm glad you're here because today we are wading into waters that I think pretty much everyone has dipped a toe into at some point.
Oh, for sure.
Or if you haven't personally, have definitely watched your friends drown in them.
It's the deep end of the pool, for sure.
It is. We're talking about the massive, just seismic shift in how human beings meet, court, and couple up.
Right.
And I'm not just talking about the shift from, meeting at a bar to meeting on an app. I'm talking about a fundamental rewiring of our social infrastructure.
It really is one of the biggest social changes of the last, say, 20 years. It has completely rewritten the script on relationships, marriage, even just casual human connection.
Absolutely. The days of getting set up by your Aunt Linda or bumping into your future spouse in the frozen food aisle, they aren't gone, but they're definitely the B-side to the main event now. We are talking about online dating.
Internet dating, virtual dating, mobile app dating, it's all the same beast.
And I think for most people, the conversation usually stops at the complaints. Ugh, Tinder is the worst, or you won't believe the weird message I just got.
Or the classic, why are all the photos of guys holding fish?
Exactly. But today, we're going to push past the anecdotes. We are going to look under the hood. I've got a massive stack of sources here. We're pulling primarily from Wikipedia's aggregation of data, which is incredibly dense. But it includes studies from the New York Times, MarketWatch, Psychological Science.
And the really heavy-duty analysis of user behavior on apps like Tinder and OkCupid.
And that's what's so important, because when you step back from the profile photos and the witty bios, what you're really looking at is a marketplace.
It's an economy, a full-blown economy of desire.
That's the mission today. We aren't just talking about romance. We are talking about game theory, evolutionary psychology, and algorithmic design.
Yeah.
I want to figure out why, if we have all this amazing technology connecting us to millions of people, does it feel so incredibly exhausting?
And I'm here to tell you that the exhaustion isn't in your head. It's actually a feature, or at least a byproduct, of the math and sociology running the show.
So it's baked into the system.
Completely. We've moved from a world of scarcity to a world of abundance, and our brains aren't exactly handling it well.
So let's unpack this. I want to start with what we're calling the marketplace of desire. Because when you strip away the emotions, we are all just commodities on a shelf, aren't we?
In a cold economic sense.
Yes.
Yes. You are a product. Your profile is the packaging.
And like any marketplace, there are trends in who gets bought and who stays on the shelf.
Exactly.
So let's look at the demographics first. This is the stuff that usually gets people arguing, but the numbers are the numbers.
They are.
There was a 2018 study analyzed by the New York Times that honestly made me gasp when I read it. It was about desirability curves based on age.
This is a classic example of revealed preferences versus stated preferences. People say one thing in surveys, oh, I just want someone kind, but they're clicks and swipes.
They tell a very different story.
A very different story. The study analyzed the activity of about 200,000 users to see when desirability peaks.
Okay, lay it on me. Let's start with the women. At what age does the data say a woman is most desirable on these apps?
For women, the peak age of desirability is 18.
18. That is the literal minimum legal age to be on the app.
It is. The moment a woman enters the digital marketplace, she is statistically at her peak value.
And it doesn't just peak there, right? It falls off.
It declines steeply after age 20. It's a very sharp downward curve.
That is brutal. I mean, think about the life experience of an 18-year-old versus a 25-year-old. But the market says, no, give me the 18-year-old.
The market is ruthless. Now, compare that to men.
I have a feeling this is going to be different.
It is the inverse. Men's desirability sets quite low in their early 20s.
Huh.
But it climbs.
It keeps climbing.
It keeps climbing. It peaks at age 50.
50. So you have an 18-year-old peak versus a 50-year-old peak. That is a 32-year gap.
It's a massive disparity.
What is going on there? Is that just pure biology?
Yep.
Is this the caveman brain telling men to look for fertility?
Well, that's part of the argument. Developmental psychologists often point to evolutionary theory, the idea that men are hardwired to look for youth as a sign of reproductive viability.
The biological imperative.
Right. But there's a huge sociological component to this, too. It's not just biology.
Right. I saw a quote from a psychotherapist, Stacy Kaiser, I think it was, in MarketWatch. She did not mince words about this dynamic.
No, she didn't. She offered a perspective that goes beyond just biology. She noted that men often prefer younger women because, in her words, they are easier to impress and more moldable.
Moldable, that is. Yikes, that word makes my skin crawl a little bit.
It implies a power dynamic, doesn't it?
Mm.
She suggested younger partners might be more flexible on everything from emotional behavior to simply picking a restaurant.
Less baggage.
Less expectations and less baggage were her exact words.
So the argument is that a 50-year-old guy doesn't want to deal with a 40-year-old woman who knows what she wants and won't put up with his nonsense?
He wants someone he can influence.
Okay.
That's the cynical but sociologically supported interpretation.
But flip the script, why are women interested in the 50-year-old man? Because the data says they are interested.
Right, his desirability is going up.
Yeah.
Well, Kaiser points out that women are optimizing for something different. They are looking for stability and resources.
So education, financial security, career establishment.
Exactly. These are all attributes that typically accumulate with age.
So the 50-year-old man represents resource security, while the 18-year-old woman represents fertility and, frankly, compliance.
It's transactionality at its peak. You trade youth for security. It's an old story, but the apps quantify it in a way that's just impossible to ignore.
Speaking of resources and education, let's talk about the education gap, because I always assumed being smarter and more educated is a universal plus in the dating market, right?
You'd think so?
If I get a degree, I should be a hotter commodity.
For men, absolutely. The data is consistent. The more educated a man is, the higher his desirability goes. A master's or PhD is like a gold star.
It signals competence, potential income.
Yep. But for women,
It's complicated.
it's complicated.
Of course it is.
One study found that women's desirability increases with education, but only up to a point. It peaks at a bachelor's degree.
And after that, a master's, a PhD.
Her desirability in that specific data set actually decreased.
So she gets penalized for being too educated.
In that data set, yes. Though, to be fair, other studies have found that men didn't necessarily dislike highly educated women. They just didn't give them a bonus for it.
So it's more of a plateau than a cliff.
A plateau, right.
Yeah.
They mainly just disfavor those with low education. But it certainly isn't the linear more is better graph that men get.
No, and when you look at specific markets, like China, it gets really specific.
The data from China regarding job titles was fascinating.
It was wild.
Yes. They looked at specific industries on a major dating site. For men, being in IT or finance makes you highly desired.
Makes sense. High resource jobs, money, stability.
But for women,
Mm.
women in IT or finance were the least desired demographic.
That is just, it's so telling. I want the money, but I don't want the woman who knows how to make the money.
It suggests a lingering adherence to traditional gender roles. You know, men want to be the provider. If the woman is a high-powered finance executive, it disrupts that dynamic.
It challenges the ego. We have to talk about race, too, because this is where the whole marketplace analogy gets really uncomfortable.
It is.
The data on racial bias and swiping is pretty undeniable.
It is. And it's important to say, online dating doesn't create racism, but it acts as a lens that magnifies it. It allows for effortless filtering based on bias.
So what do the numbers say? What's the hierarchy?
Multiple studies going back over a decade show these distinct hierarchies. Generally, white men and Asian women tend to be the most desired demographics across the board.
And who is on the other end of that spectrum?
Historically, Black women and Asian men have had the hardest time securing matches.
I've heard that.
Although, a more recent analysis did challenge the narrative around Asian men slightly, suggesting they aren't as uniquely disadvantaged as previously thought compared to other men of color. But the hierarchy is still very much there.
And there was a point about who is doing the excluding that I found really telling.
Yes. This is crucial because it challenges some assumptions. It turns out white women are much more exclusionary than white men.
What's the stat on that?
One study found that white women exclude non-white men at significantly higher rates than white men exclude non-white women.
Okay, so it's not just personal preference. We are seeing societal hierarchies mapping directly onto our digital choices.
Exactly. And the algorithm reinforces it. This is the danger. If you never swipe right on a certain demographic, the app eventually stops showing them to you.
It creates a segregated reality.
It does. You might think, oh, there just aren't diverse people in my area, but actually the app has decided you don't like them, so it hid them. It effectively automates segregation.
Which is a perfect segue into how the apps actually work, because it's not just about who we are, it's about the strategy we use.
Yes, the game theory of it all.
This is where it gets really interesting for me.
Me too. There was a study by Gareth Tyson from Queen Mary University of London. He analyzed Tinder behavior in NYC and London, and he found that men and women are basically playing two different sports.
Okay, let's break down the male strategy first.
Tyson found that men generally adopt what we call the shotgun approach.
Meaning they just swipe right on everything.
They like a massive proportion of profiles. They are swiping right on almost everyone. The goal is to maximize the potential for any match. Quantity over quality.
They aren't reading the bios, are they?
Oh, definitely not. It's speed swiping.
But does it work?
Statistically, no. The study found men received matches only 0.6% of the time.
Wait, 0.6%? That is less than 1 in 100.
It is statistically negligible. It's a strategy of desperation. You are throwing everything at the wall, and basically nothing is sticking.
Okay, now the women. What's their game?
Women use the sniper approach.
Highly selective.
Highly selective. They swipe right very rarely. They actually evaluate the profiles. And their match rate, about 10%.
So women are selective and successful. Men are indiscriminate and failing.
And this creates a vicious cycle. It's a feedback loop that destroys the user experience for everyone.
Walk us through this cycle. How does that work?
Okay. Step 1. Men realize they rarely get matches. So to increase their odds, they start swiping right on everyone.
Just spamming a like button.
Exactly. Which then floods the women with notifications. So step 2. Women get overwhelmed with matches. They have choice overload.
So to manage the noise, they have to get even pickier.
They become even more selective. They raise the bar because they can't possibly talk to 500 people.
And because women raise the bar.
Step 3. Men get even fewer matches. So they become even more desperate and swipe even more indiscriminately.
It's a race to the bottom. The signal-to-noise ratio is completely broken.
It is. A like from a man essentially means nothing because he likes everyone. It has no value. A like from a woman implies a high degree of intent.
And this imbalance carries over into the messaging, right? Even when a match happens, the effort levels are totally different.
Drastically different. Men send messages much faster, within 5 minutes of matching, but they average about 12 characters.
12 characters, that's hey, and maybe a smiley face.
Pretty much. Women wait longer, about 18 minutes, but their first messages average 122 characters.
They're actually trying to start a conversation.
Exactly. And there was a super counterintuitive point about positive messages from men.
Oh yeah, I saw this. Being nice hurts you. How is that possible?
The study found that positively worded messages from men compliments, flattery, actually decreased the response rate.
Why? Everyone likes a compliment.
It's not that being nice hurts, it's that generic niceness hurts. If you say you have a beautiful smile, it signals that you probably say that to everyone.
It's low-effort spam, a copy-paste job.
Precisely. Women are filtering for specific engagement. If you look like a bot or a shotgunner, you get ignored.
So the apps are stuck in this loop. How do they try to fix it? I know they use algorithms to try and get better matches.
They do. They use something called collaborative filtering. Think of it like Amazon or Netflix recommendations.
People who bought this toaster also bought these headphones.
Exactly. Dating apps started doing this. They realized that people lie about what they want. You might say you want a tall, outdoorsy guy who loves reading.
But you keep swiping on short, indoor gamers.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah?
We don't always know what we want. So the app ignores your stated preferences. It looks at your revealed preferences. It says, okay, she liked person A. Other people who liked person A also like person B. So we will show her person B.
So it matches us based on our behavior, not our profile settings.
Correct. And this approach was found to increase response chances by 40%. It's much more effective. Is the algorithm saying, I know you better than you know yourself?
That's smart. But there's another study from China in 2024 that threw a wrench in the idea of more data is better.
The less is more paradox.
Right.
They found that seeing a short profile just the basics, actually led to more matches than seeing a long, detailed profile.
Why? I feel like I'd want to know more before I match.
You'd think so. But detailed profiles highlight preference mismatches. Maybe you see they like a political candidate you hate, or they love cats and you're allergic.
You find a reason to say no.
You find a reason to say no before you even say hello. But if the profile is short,
You project your own desires onto the gaps. You fill in the blanks with what you hope they're like.
ambiguity is attractive because it allows for fantasy.
So we are falling in love with a blank canvas, which explains why so many first dates are disappointments. You're meeting the reality, not the projection.
Exactly.
Okay, so we know the game is rigged. We know the biases are there. But people still have to use these things. Let's talk strategy. If you're listening to this and you're on the apps, how do you actually win?
Well, if we want to get really nerdy, we can look at optimal stopping theory.
Please, let's get nerdy. What is optimal stopping?
It's a mathematical problem, often called the secretary problem or the 37% rule.
Okay, explain the 37% rule.
The theory suggests that if you have a pool of potential partners, say you are willing to date 100 people, the mathematically optimal strategy is to reject the first 37% of them completely.
You just burn through the first third, even if they are amazing.
You date them, you evaluate them, but you do not commit. You use them just to establish a baseline of what is out there. You have to calibrate your expectations.
Okay, so I've dated 37 people. Then what?
Once you have passed that 37% mark, you then commit to the very next person who is better than everyone you saw in the first group.
That is incredibly cold.
It is cold. It's an algorithm.
Yeah.
But mathematically, it maximizes your probability of picking the absolute best candidate.
I feel like explaining to my date that they are part of my 37% baseline rejection phase would not go over well.
I would not recommend that as a pickup line. Congratulations, you are the first data point to exceed my calibration set.
Yeah, enjoy being single after saying that. But speaking of aiming high, let's talk about leagues. Is that real?
It is very real in the data. Researchers found that about 75% of users tried to date up. They define aspirational dating as trying to initiate contact with someone who is about 25% more desirable than yourself.
Everyone wants a deal. Everyone wants to trade up.
Right. And usually, this results in rejection. That's why the match rates are so low. But, and here's the silver lining, persistence actually pays off sometimes.
Really?
The study found that because the choice set is so wide, people who are persistent do occasionally succeed in upgrading their league.
So shooting your shot actually works.
It has a low success rate, but it's not zero. And because the cost of sending a message is so low, it encourages people to keep reaching.
But this reaching creates a lot of noise. And it also creates an environment ripe for deception. We have to talk about the lying.
Oh yeah, everybody lies. Well, 9 out of 10 participants lie on at least one attribute, according to one study.
9 out of 10, what are they lying about?
Weight is the most common lie. Men tend to add a few inches to their height. Women tend to subtract a few pounds.
Classic.
Age is actually the least lied about, surprisingly. But people constantly tweak their income, their job titles. It's impression management.
And sometimes it goes beyond just tweaking stats. We've seen the rise of ghosting.
Ghosting is a fascinating social phenomenon. It's the practice of vanishing without explanation, and it's largely blamed on choice overload.
Right. If you have 50 other matches, the social cost of ignoring one person feels very low.
Exactly. In online dating, you don't share a social circle. If I ghost user 492, there are no consequences. Nobody holds me accountable.
It's a low accountability environment. And that has led to a massive counter-movement, right? That
Yeah.
Are we dating the same guy? Groups.
Oh, these are huge.
Yeah.
I think there are over 120 of them on Facebook now. It's a crowdsourced background check system. Women post screenshots of profiles and ask any tea or red flags. It's an attempt to reimpose social accountability on a system that stripped it away.
It's like the users are building their own safety layer because the apps aren't doing it.
Right.
Which brings us to the so what of this whole discussion. We have this massive machine, billions of swipes, sophisticated algorithms. Are we actually winning? Are we happier?
That is the paradox. We have more choice than any generation in history. Barry Schwartz calls this the paradox of choice. When you have too many options, you experience choice overload.
It paralyzes you.
It does, and it creates phobo fear of a better option. You fear that if you pick one person, you might be missing out on a slightly better person just one swipe away.
It undermines the willingness to commit. Why work through a rough patch in a relationship when you can just open the app?
Exactly. People become disposable.
So, does this lead to worse marriages or better ones? What's the data say?
The data is conflicting, which is frustrating.
Give me the good news first.
A PNAS study in 2013 suggested that online marriages had slightly higher satisfaction and lower divorce rates. The argument is that these people are more motivated and shopped around more.
Okay. And the bad news?
A 2020 study linked increased broadband access to higher divorce rates. And a 2024 study suggested an online dating effect where marriages are less satisfying.
Why would that be?
They theorize it might be due to a lack of community support around the relationship because you met in a vacuum, or just that people who meet online know how easy it is to go back and look for alternatives.
It seems like the industry itself is hitting a wall, too. I've seen the headlines about Match Group and Bumble stock.
It's a bloodbath financially. Between 2021 and 2024, they lost about $40 billion in market value.
$40 billion, that is a staggering amount of value destruction.
It reflects user fatigue. People are tired. They're tired of the gamification. They're paying monthly subscriptions and not getting the result they want.
It's almost like the business model is at odds with the user's goal.
That is the provocative thought to end on. If the app makes money by showing you ads or keeping you subscribed, does it actually want you to find love and leave?
If I find a partner, I delete the app. They lose a customer.
Exactly. A perfectly efficient dating app would put itself out of business. So we are left with a system designed to be just efficient enough to keep you hopeful, but perhaps not efficient enough to let you leave.
That is slightly depressing, but also explains a lot.
It explains why you are still swiping at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday.
Okay, let's wrap this up. We have moved from the scarcity of the village to the abundance of the globe.
But our brains are still wired for the village. We aren't built to handle thousands of rejections or thousands of options.
The algorithm gets you to the table, as we said, but it can't eat the dinner for you.
And it certainly can't guarantee you'll like the food.
Thank you for listening to this deep dive. I hope next time you open that app, you see the matrix code behind the profile picture.
It might not get you a date, but at least you'll know why you're swiping.
Stay curious, and we'll see you next time.